Welcome to Anything is Possible, the Boston Celtics podcast here on the Athletic Podcast Network. I'm your host, Sam Jam Packard, professional sports fan, and I am joined, as always, by the kid, the god, the legend himself, Celtics beat reporter from The Athletic, Jay King, ladies and gentlemen. And we are coming to you at the end of the 2020-2021 Boston Celtics season. The Celtics lose in 5 games to the Brooklyn Nets, losing Game 5, 123-109, in what was, I would say, a generally confusing Game 5 that kind of felt like a preseason game.
Or a summer league game.
Yeah, not a lot of energy there tonight. The Celtics played it close. They were kind of in it for most of the game until obviously the fix was in from the NBA referees. James Harden gets called for his 5th foul against Evan Fournier with about 8 minutes left to play. It gets overturned after he clearly elbowed Fournier in the forehead. And then the Nets hit 3 threes in a row and the game was over. But at no point did I really think the Celtics were going to win this game. At no point did I think the Celtics were really going to win this series. It just was kind of the conclusion we all thought was going to happen. And other than that, I don't know what the big takeaways are from this game. Jason Tatum finished with 32 points, ended up averaging 30 points for the series. Had a big game from Romeo Langford, who scored 17 points, his career high in any game. But I don't know, Jay, what was your big takeaway from Game 5 of Nets Celtics?
I mean, what it came down to was the Celtics were going to have to make a lot of shots to beat Brooklyn and just didn't. And, you know, people were on Twitter mad at Marcus Smart for taking a bunch of shots early. Like, who else do you want taking the shots? Fournier took 17 shots. Romeo Langford took 12. Like, the other options were Jabari Parker, Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard. Like, Marcus Smart was the 2nd or 3rd best offensive player on the court for the Celtics. And so that's the difference. Jason Tatum is making kickouts to Jabari Parker and Romeo Langford, and James Harden is making kickouts to Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Joe Harris. So what are you going to do? I thought the biggest takeaway of the post-game press conferences was that to the end, the Celtics thought differently of themselves than you did.
Not me. I always liked them.
Yeah, but like they faced the reality of it, which was that they probably didn't have enough talent in the first place. They were never healthy enough to get chemistry, never healthy enough to have a real chance. And so while everyone else was super frustrated with everything going on, I think they were working toward getting to a place where hopefully they could enter the playoffs and give themselves a chance with a full roster, and they just never got there. So I think everyone involved thought it was a very frustrating season, but I think for the Celtics players, it was for very different reasons than probably for everyone else. I just think they thought, you know, that this was just a really, really tough season in a lot of ways. And Brad Stevens, and he was right, said, still there's enough information, plenty of information to show they need to get better. And they do. They're not good enough. They wouldn't have been good enough if they were healthy. But they certainly weren't going to be good enough with 3 starters down.
I think Marcus Smart said it best. It's hard to be consistent when you consistently don't have everyone there to be consistent. I mean, just an electric quote from Marcus Smart after the game, but I think it did shape up for the entire season. Just no matter, like, they had a very slim margin for error, and then they had players miss the entire year. I don't think we should get into a full season recap pod right now. We will do that later in the week. So I guess we'll focus on this game. And then was a lot of comments post game. We got 5 or 4 different players, 5 different players speak.
We'll do a little discussion of the future tonight.
Oh, we can discuss the future.
Talk about Game 5. Why the fuck would we just talk
about
Game 5?
It's not just Game 5. I was going to limit it.
The most boring playoff game of all time.
It was pretty boring, and we're not going to just focus on the game, but I don't think we need to rehash what's going to happen in the entire offseason. We can focus on what was said after Game 5 by it was interesting. You don't normally get 5 guys after the game, but Kemba, Marcus Smart, Fournier, Tristan Thompson, and Jason Tatum spoke after the game, and just like it was much more substantive questions than I think we've seen the rest of the, or at least this series. I guess
it's the last time we'll talk to those guys.
They're not going to have exit interviews like they do every year.
Sounds like we won't get any players for exit interviews.
We need to ask Romeo about his 17 points.
There will be no asking Romeo about his 17 points. All
right. Well, then you're the media man. What was your biggest takeaway from the 5 press conferences that I guess served as their exit interviews? I thought it was. I guess I'll let you answer the question before I just go into my answer.
I think one takeaway is Kemba Walker was just very sad. He was really upset that he wasn't healthy. He thought that he was getting healthy and thought that the plan for strengthening his knee was going to work. And then he said it was just an unfortunate incident in game 2. Didn't think it was related to the other issues, which if that's true, would probably be promising news. But obviously, like, he's been playing for 2 years straight, basically. They had the NBA hiatus, but guys were still working out, like trying to stay in shape, get ready for the latter half of that season. And before that, it was Team USA. He had a full Hornet season. Like, he's just been going nonstop, and his body could probably use a break, and a break that's not like he went and got an injection and has to recover. Like, he should be able to get back on the court pretty soon and work on some things. But they need him. That's the biggest question to me in their offseason and moving forward is, what do they do with Kemba, and how is he, and can he stay healthy if he still is in Boston? So it's a huge question to answer. And I think, I just feel bad for the guy because he really is a really competitive guy, and he was looking forward to his first chance to play in the playoffs in Boston, and it just never worked out for him. So I actually feel bad for the guy.
Yeah, he just for a guy who's famously always has a smile on his face, he just looked pretty down after the game. Obviously, it's like asking a bunch of, I guess, depressing questions like, how disappointed are you that you weren't able to do this? And so he's not going to be cheery about it. But I did think it was interesting that he said the knee issue, he kept on referring to it as an incident, which was just odd phrasing, but he said it was not related to his previous knee issue. It's just a separate bone bruise, which I guess is a good thing. And when asked about kind of if he plans to rehab the knee or what that, like, it sounded like he didn't think he had to go through the same kind of strengthening rehab he went through.
Yeah, it sounded like he hopes to play back-to-backs next year too, and doesn't want to go through that same type of shit. So,
well, that's huge for the Celtics, just because if you like, Kemba Walker is going to be a huge part of just their offseason strategy and whatever they do moving forward. And I think they were right to not play him in back-to-backs this year because they needed him to be healthy for the playoffs, and it's unfortunate it didn't work out. But if he didn't have the bone bruise, you'd think it would have. But they also, because of the condensed schedule, they had more back-to-backs this year, but they clearly, given how tight the Eastern Conference was, they could have used him in the kind of the 10 to 12 games that he missed because of not having the back-to-back. So if you're going to be paying him $30 million a year, you're going to want him to play over 70, 75 games. And so I thought that was an interesting takeaway from Kemba. For Marcus Smart, he mentioned that it was just a tough year personally, and he mentioned that he, due to COVID, had personally lost 3 to 4 people in his life, which is just really sad news. And I think there's been kind of rumblings about Marcus Smart's just personal life and kind of him dealing with all of that kind of off the court stuff this year. And I never really had a clear sense until this evening of what that exactly was, but that's just would weigh on anyone trying to play a kind of a difficult basketball season. And I was just kind of struck by how difficult that must have been for Marcus for the entire season to kind of go through that, having lost 4 people in his life and still trying to kind of play a basketball season. That was kind of just eye-opening when he said that in his press conference.
Yeah, and another reminder that you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes a lot of the time with these guys. and that they're probably dealing with a lot more than you think. But yeah, I mean, and another takeaway from his press conference is he was asked, do the Celtics need to basically make big changes with the approach they take? And he said, like, just kind of try to pump those brakes a little bit, and said, we've been to the Eastern Conference Finals 3 of the last 4 years. And I think he's right on that. Like, obviously, the Celtics want to do more than that. Obviously, they want to go to the finals and they want to win the finals and get another championship. But it's also important to keep in mind that, like, they've had a lot of success with a lot of the faces that are in the building right now, and they just need to be better. It starts with Danny Ainge. He needs to build out the supporting cast. He needs to just surround Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown with guys who can accentuate those guys and guys who can play mature basketball and be ready to play mature basketball all the time. And then they need, some of their young guys, whoever's still around, to take steps forward. Robert Williams needs to stay healthy. Peyton Pritchard, Aaron Nesmith, Romeo Langford, those guys need to make strides. Grant Williams. So there's a lot to figure out for the Celtics this offseason. And like they all said, like, it was just a very tough season, a very unfortunate season in a lot of ways. But they still need to make changes. And I think most of those will come to the roster, and then come back and hope that some of the young guys, including Tatum and Brown, get better over the offseason.
I thought it was interesting how I think when anyone, Brad and then the 5 guys who were interviewed were just kind of talking about the young guys. There was some young guys they mentioned and some guys they didn't. And it was like, there's the clear guys that you're building around: Peyton Pritchard, Nesmith, Romeo. I think some people occasionally threw Grant in there, but he clearly wasn't like the main core of this team. And I think there's like the star core, and then there's those young guys. And a lot of credit was given to Peyton Pritchard and Nesmith, and Jason Tatum said that, like, this game 5 was probably the best we've ever seen from Romeo Langford. I would have to agree, just in terms of his defensive ability. Like, he had really like nice plays and has showed an ability to guard players like Kyrie Irving all the way up to Kevin Durant. And then if he's able to knock down even just a semblance of the threes he made tonight, I think that's just shows a huge potential for Romeo Langford moving forward. And he hasn't really gotten a chance to have an offseason. Really, neither has Peyton Pritchard, neither has Aaron Nesmith. I thought Brad's comments about that are just like, they need to get better. They need to have an offseason where they make strides, but this is like really their first chance to kind of get that growth. And so I thought that was just an interesting, is like, there's 3 guys who were mentioned pretty much as when talking about changes pretty consistently, is like guys who you expect to be here and kind of contribute next year. And it was Pritchard, Nesmith, and Langford.
Yeah, I never know how much to take from that, because it's while you're answering a question, you're just listing guys. It doesn't always mean
They didn't
a
talk
lot.
about Tremont. They didn't talk about Shemi.
Yeah, I mean, would you?
No, I mean, I just did, but I probably, when talking about the post game, anything else from, I guess, Evan Fournier was asked about becoming he's now an unrestricted free agent. Tim Bontemps immediately asked him about his free agency.
That was funny. Fournier's like right into it, huh?
Fournier, I thought it was interesting from him, is he's still kind of suffering from COVID stuff and just talking about how shitty he felt. And there's still times where he was losing focus. And I just don't think we have a full grasp of how difficult it's been for some guys to recover from COVID. And it sounds like he's getting healthier and is getting a second shot, but I couldn't really get a read on his desire to come back. I felt like he said a lot of things about great organization, but I would need to focus on playing for France in a couple weeks, which is wild to me that anyone would decide to play in the Olympics. Jason Tatum was asked about it. I think he kind of said, yeah, but no thanks. I don't think he's going to end up playing in the Olympics based on no information at all. But could you really get a read on what do you expect Fournier to do heading into this offseason?
I think it'll probably depend on money.
Oh, yeah, money, eh?
Yeah, And I believe him when he said he appreciated his time with the Celtics.
Sheesh! I'm sorry, Dame just tied this fucking game again.
That's beautiful. I believe him when he said he liked his time with the Celtics and called them an A+ organization. I also think that he could probably look around and be like, where do I fit in here if everybody's healthy? Do I want to come off the bench? Do I want to – will I get enough touches? So I think probably a lot of it, though, could come down to money. Will the Celtics pay up enough? Will they – how willing are they to go into the luxury tax, and how deep into the luxury tax are they willing to go? So they've got some questions in that regard.
I mean, there's not a lot of great free agents this year. Like the free agency class is like everyone thought it was going to be Giannis, but you look at it. I was looking at it today on another podcast, Not Here to Argue with Tyler I Am. Please subscribe. But there's not a great free agency class, and so teams will have some money to spend. And so I don't know if like the Celtics are going to be able to match the money that Fournier could make. So I think it'll be interesting to see what his offers are and whether or not he wants to come back. And if he comes back, he's basically signing to be their sixth man. Like there's not a starting role for him on this team if everyone is healthy. And it's like, how much does he value winning and how much does he want to be on like a kind of a role player on I guess a pseudo contender or maybe contender rather than being what he's used to for his entire career, which has been a star or a star on the Magic.
Yeah, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Like, there aren't many teams, winning teams, that he would go to and be the go-to guy. Like, it was that case in Orlando, sort of. I mean, Vucevic was really the go-to guy. But as far as perimeter guys went, it was him. But how many situations are there like that for him? And,
he could go to the Knicks. They certainly need some sort of offense.
They could use some offense, yeah. Yeah, but Celtics, to me, it's like I think they have questions about their supporting cast, not least of which is how much money are you willing to pay? That Jason Tatum's extension is going to kick in, and their roster is going to get very expensive. So there are a lot of decisions to be made, and especially after this season, like, does ownership want to pay up for a ton for a team that may never be good enough?
Well, that was a question I think Gary Washburn asked of a number of players of like, the East is pretty stacked right now. The Nets aren't going away. The Bucks aren't going away. The Sixers aren't going away. What do the Celtics need to do to kind of reach that tier of players? And I don't know if there's an answer other than hope Jason Tatum continues his kind of rise to becoming an MVP level player. Tristan Thompson said he kind of expects him to be an MVP one day, but given the kind of where they are salary cap wise and where they are with the current roster, I feel like that's the only thing the Celtics can do is just hope that Jason Tatum, he showed that he can be the best player in a game, in a playoff game, as he was in Game 3. It'll be interesting to see moving forward if he can become the best player in a series. But I think that's all they have to do, really, is like we've seen with the Lakers right now. They're getting smoked. AD is hurt. Like if you are within a sniff of contending, I think you have to put your best team forward. And injuries happen, upsets happen, like we saw last year with Miami and the Bucks. Like I think the Celtics have the talent, if they're all healthy, to be in that top tier. I don't think they would be favored with all those teams, but I think they're like right there. And so I think they have to kind of just go for it because I don't really see what the other options are.
They also have a lot of guys who are health questions. Robert Williams, he's had iffy health all along.
I think his extension is going to be a huge question this offseason.
Kemba Walker, he's had iffy health. So those are two very important players that you don't know about.
What do you do about that?
Then the other part is Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Like, it's annoying to talk about their extensions, the end of their contract and what they could do at that point. But you need to build a contending team around them. Right now, Kemba is in his 30s. He's probably not going to be a part of that. Marcus Smart could be a part of that. Like, is Evan Fournier going to be a part of that? How many pieces from this team are going to be a part of that? So there could need to be an overhaul of the team by then. And when do you start that? Who do you go after? And so they have to keep all those questions in mind. Like, this season shined a light on how far away they are, and especially how far away they are from a team like the Nets. And obviously, if Jalen had been healthy, that would have been a totally different series. And I think you could convince yourself, like, Tatum and Brown, not even convince yourself, Tatum and Brown are two great building blocks to have, and two young building blocks who have each improved substantially over the course of their young careers. You can feel very comfortable with your franchise in the hands of those two guys, while also acknowledging there are many steps to go for both those guys and the rest of the roster, especially the rest of the roster, to build a championship contender, or a team that, like, isn't just a fringe contender like they were last season, you know? So there is a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do. But
a lot of work.
You can see with Philly, like, if you put the right pieces around two really great players, then you can change the entire look of a team in 1 year. And that's what Philly did. You know, they went out and got the right type of supporting cast, and it made everybody look better. It made Embiid look better. It made Simmons look better. It made the coach, who's new, but it would have made Brett Brown look better if he'd been there. So it's not impossible to make two players look a lot better just by changing the pieces around them. And Tatum and Brown looked very good this year anyway.
So there's a lot of questions about this offseason, is what to do with Kemba, what to do with possibly Marcus Smart, what Robert Williams extension. I believe you and I will probably be having this same conversation for the next probably 3 months. And so no need to have it again today. I'm calling it off, calling audible. We're not going to have a potable 6-pack because I just don't know if there is 6 things to talk about from this game. I do want to mention this Kyrie Irving quote from after the game, talking about his Brooklyn Nets team. He said, "We're uniting the whole world with this championship run, so I hope everyone is with us. We're uniting the whole world with this run, and stick with us, baby." And just a beautiful, wildly naive and ambitious and incredibly delusional quote from Kyrie Irving, the king of hoopla, the hoopla king. One of the more divisive people in terms of a guy who just stomped the logo, the special paint on the court, but he is uniting the world in his championship run. I just thought that was a perfect response from Kyrie. People were upset that the Celtics were hugging him after the game because people are idiots and don't realize, like, that's what the NBA is. But fantastic stuff from Kyrie there.
I also want to point out that Tristan Thompson is a man of incredible comparisons. I mean, he made me think of Tommy Heinsohn, R.I.P. Tommy Heinsohn. He made me a little sad because some of the comparisons he made. He said for Tatum, this could be like when LeBron got to the finals and lost to the Mavericks and learn like what's.
Well, he was talking about like LeBron's like specific post game and then like KD getting to his spots.
Yeah, still. And then he said Robert Williams could be like Tyson Chandler. So
which one didn't make sense to me because I think of Robert Williams as much more of an offensive player than defensive player of the year potential. But who am I? Tristan Thompson plays against him every
Tyson
day.
Chandler was a lob catcher too, man. That man caught many lobs in his day. But yeah, just an electric. I kind of wanted to just ask Tristan comparison after comparison, like. So,
go through the entire roster.
What do you think about Shemi? What do you think about Shemi? Well, you know, I see a little Giannis in him. What about Draymond? Young Kyrie.
He's got court vision. He's got Steve Nash.
Young Kyrie, maybe Steve Nash. You know, I wanted to go through the whole roster, but unfortunately there were time constraints.
I was pretty hard on Tristan Thompson this entire year, but man, can't wait to get into the locker room because that man gives an electric quote. Just a fantastic interview. And so kudos to him for willingness to swear in media conferences and just doesn't really have a filter. That's That's fantastic. That's going to wrap it up from us tonight. We'll be back later in the week to talk about all these off-season questions, all of the answers, all of these things. That's what we do here on Anything is Potable. Thanks to the people out there in YouTube land for watching us live. Thanks to everyone who subscribes to the podcast and gives us 5 stars, downloads the podcast, listens on a regular basis. We really appreciate it. And Jay, I was curious, in 1952, when Adlai Stevenson decided not to use television commercials in his campaign, was that potable?
Who the fuck is
Anything
that?
is potable!